I'm Margaret Brooks, 67 years old, retired after 4 decades as an accountant and still waking up at 6 a.m. Without needing an alarm, the house is quiet except for the ticking wall clock and the low hum of the refrigerator outside the window. It's raining, a light mist moving through the empty streets of my neighborhood in Ashfield, Washington. I made oatmeal for breakfast, the way I always do, with a handful of raisins and a glass of orange juice. I sat at the table alone, staring at the third-place setting that no one used on my birthday. I had baked a pie and opened a bottle of wine, hoping someone would show up, but no one did, not even my daughter. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever sat at a table waiting on someone who never came. I was born and raised in Ashfield and never felt the need to leave. It's the kind of place where people know your name at the post office, where the supermarket cashier still remembers your children's birthdays. I married my high school sweetheart Harold when I was 22. He passed away far too young, and since then the house has been mine to keep up and mine to fill with noise where there is none. Our children, Nellie and James, were raised with everything we could give them. Love, stability, boundaries, and blueberry pie on Sundays. Harold used to say, I was too soft with them. He'd shake his head when I gave in to another whim or stayed up late helping with a science fair project. But I always believed that kindness and consistency would matter in the long run. Nellie moved out west after college, said she needed a bigger stage for her ideas and ambitions. She works in advertising now in Seattle. At least, that's what she tells me, though. I don't understand much about what she actually does. She sends texts when she needs something. A new laptop, a dental bill, help with a deposit. It's always urgent, always followed by silence. My son James lives on the other side of town with his wife Jessica and their son Tyler. James doesn't ask for help. He doesn't ask for anything, really. He's polite, efficient in his calls, like a well-trained office manager. Jessica keeps things even more formal, like I'm someone she knows vaguely from a parent-teacher night. Tyler's the only one who visits without needing a reason. He's 13 now, tall and quick with his questions. We bake together sometimes, or look through old photo albums. He asked me once what it was like before phones, and I told him stories about payphones and cassette tapes. He laughed so hard he nearly dropped the flower bowl 3 weeks ago on my birthday. I got one short text from Nellie. Happy birthday, Mom. No punctuation, no emoji, no call. That night, I sat alone at the table with a bottle of wine and a pie that only had one slice missing the rest. I took to the ducks in the park the next morning. At least they seemed glad to see me. This morning, I sat with my tea going cold in the cup and scrolled through my messages. There it was, a new one from Nellie. Don't come, just send me a check, no greeting, no explanation. Not even a number, just the assumption that I'd ask how much she needed and send it like always. I replied, asking what the money was for. She answered immediately. Promotion party with colleagues, need one to 500. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I had worked every day of my life, raised those children with everything I had. And now I was nothing more than a convenient fund. I told her I'd bring something over tomorrow, that we'd talk face to face. 20 minutes later, another message came. Don't come, Mom. I'm busy. Just transfer the money, okay? I didn't answer. Instead, I went upstairs into the attic and started looking through the boxes, dusty but full of our history. Baby teeth, old report cards, drawings made with crayon, and spelling mistakes, and hearts drawn around my name. That night I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook open and began writing a letter. Not angry, not scolding, just honest. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted her to remember who we are. By morning, I had a plan and a box full of truth. I was going to deliver it myself, and I had no idea how she'd react when she opened it. but something told me it would be the beginning of everything that had to change. The drive to Seattle was long, gray, and quiet. Rain traced lines down the windshield, steady and thin, the kind that doesn't make much noise, but never really lets up. I kept the box buckled in on the passenger seat beside me, like it was something alive, something that might shift or stir if I took a sharp turn. I hadn't made this trip in a while, not since last fall when Nellie had moved into her new place. It had felt strange even then, parking near her building, walking past the sleek glass lobby, pretending I wasn't out of place. This time, I didn't even make it upstairs. The concierge was a young man, neat beard, polite voice, the kind who probably remembers every resident's name and favorite latte order. I gave him mine and told him I was dropping off a package for my daughter. He said she wasn't in, asked if I wanted to wait. I said no. I handed him the box and asked him to make sure she got it. Then I walked back out into the rain. I took my time getting back to the car. There wasn't anything I needed to rush for. On the way home, I stopped at a cafe down by the waterfront, ordered tea, and sat by the window watching people come and go in their bright jackets and umbrellas. The harbor lights were blurry through the drizzle, and the world felt quiet in a different kind of way than Ashfield. I thought about Harold. We'd always said we'd travel after retirement. Saved for it, too. Had lists of places we wanted to see. But his heart gave out one morning, and that was the end of those plans. I hadn't traveled alone before. I'd always told myself it wouldn't feel right going to those places without him. But now, something was shifting. Maybe I didn't need anyone's permission to start over. I stopped at the grocery store on the way back. Picked up a few things for the week. Soup, bread, apples. At the end of the cereal aisle, I heard someone say my name. It was Tyler, my grandson. He looked taller since I last saw him. Still had that same shy grin, though. Said he was with Jessica, that she was in the cosmetics aisle. I asked how school was going, if he was still into chemistry. He lit up, started talking about a project he was working on, something with organic compounds. I didn't understand most of it, but I nodded and listened because I could tell it mattered to him. Then out of nowhere, he asked where I'd been. Said James had mentioned I went to Seattle. I said yes, that I'd dropped something off for Nellie. His expression shifted slightly. He looked down at the floor tiles and then back up at me. Grandma, Mom said the promotion wasn't real. She told Dad Nellie made it up to impress some new guy. I didn't say anything at first. I just waited. She also said, Aunt Nellie calls you her personal ATM, he added, frowning. Dad got mad when she said it. They argued. I nodded slowly, keeping my voice steady as I asked if he was sure. He said he was, but I could see he felt bad for telling me. He looked like he wasn't sure if he should have said anything at all. Before I could say much else, Jessica appeared, her arms full of shopping bags, her tone brisk and polite. I didn't realize you were in town, Margaret, she said. I just got back. I answered. I dropped off something for Nellie. She didn't ask what, just gave a nod and said the weather had been awful lately. We made small talk for a minute, the kind you do when there's nothing real to say. Then she reminded Tyler to meet her at the register. He waved goodbye and promised to show me his chemistry experiments next weekend. I watched them walk away, bags swinging at their sides, Jessica already talking to someone on her phone. The rest of the drive felt longer than it should have. The roads were familiar, but everything seemed quieter. I kept thinking about what Tyler said, about the party, the promotion, about being called an ATM. That night, the house felt heavier when I walked through the door. I put the groceries away, heated up a bowl of soup I didn't finish. Went to bed with the sound of rain still tapping on the windows. In the morning, just after sunrise, the phone rang. It was early, too early for anything ordinary. I picked up the receiver. What does this mean? Nellie's voice was sharp high with tension. I didn't ask what she meant. I knew. She had opened the box. She was angry, called the contents junk, asked if this was supposed to be some kind of punishment. I kept my voice calm, told her it was a piece of our family history, that I didn't want her to forget who we were, who she was, who I was. She accused me of digging through her personal things, said I had no right. I reminded her it was my money, the money I had saved for my medical treatment, the money she said would grow if I trusted her and her finance friend. There was a pause on the other end, then a quieter voice. I was going to pay you back, she said. I just needed time. 2 years passed, Nellie, I replied, and in all that time, you never told me the truth. She didn't respond at first. Then she asked, who told you about the promotion, about the party? I told her it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had lied again. I heard the shuffle of paper. She was looking through the rest of the box now. My college sweatshirt. Seriously. She was trying to change the subject. I said I kept it because it mattered to me, just like she did. There was silence, then a sound I hadn't heard from her in a long time, a stifled sob. I'll come over today, she said. We need to talk. I'll be here, I answered. Before she hung up, she added, and yeah, I didn't get a raise. I'm barely holding on to my job. I set the phone down and stared out the window. The sky was gray, same as the day before. I didn't know what to expect from the conversation ahead. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like something real might finally be said between us. I cleaned the kitchen, took out apples for a pie. I didn't know if she would eat any. I just wanted it to be ready. That afternoon, I saw her car pull up. She sat there for a moment before getting out. When she finally knocked, I was already at the door. She had the box in her hands. Hi, Mom, she said. Come in, I told her. We walked to the living room. She placed the box on the table between us, but didn't sit right away. I don't want anything to eat, she said. Let's just talk. So we did, and for the first time in years, my daughter looked me in the eye, not as someone she needed something from, but as someone she might finally be willing to tell the truth. Nellie sat down on the edge of the sofa, her back straight, but her shoulders tense. The box was between us, resting on the coffee table like an unanswered question. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. For a while, neither of us said anything. I offered tea again, even though I knew she'd say no. She just shook her head once and folded her hands in her lap. I don't understand why you did this, she said finally, her voice low-controlled. Why not just say no, because it was more than just another request, I said. Because this isn't the first time you've reached out to me only when you need money. She looked down, tracing the stitching on the side seam of her blouse. That habit hadn't changed. She used to do the same thing as a little girl when she got caught sneaking cookies from the jar. I didn't mean it that way, she said. I know it seems like... It doesn't seem... I said gently. It is. I didn't want to scold you. I wanted you to remember who we are, or at least who we used to be. Nellie opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She let out a breath and leaned back slightly against the cushions. Things have been harder than I let on, she said after a pause. I lost my job 3 months ago. Officially, they called it a reassignment, but I was demoted. Same office, different title, lower pay. No real authority. I'm basically someone's assistant now. I nodded, listening. She kept going. After that project I messed up, I was already on thin ice. Then Brad left. Took half the furniture with him. The rent's too high, but I was trying to keep things together. I thought I'd get back on my feet before anyone noticed. And the promotion, I asked. The party. She looked away. There is no promotion, she said. I made that up. I thought maybe if it looked like things were going well, maybe I'd feel like they were. The silence stretched between us. I waited. She looked back at me, eyes tired. I wasn't trying to lie, not at first. It just got easier than telling the truth. Easier for who I asked. Because I didn't know anything was wrong. And I would have helped if you'd told me. I was ashamed, she said. You've always been proud of me. I didn't want to admit I'd messed everything up. She reached into the box, then lifting out a photograph, one of the ones I'd placed on top. It was from a picnic when she was 6. Her hair was in messy pigtails, and she had ice cream on her shirt. Harold was in the background setting up the grill. James had one shoe off and a frog in his hand. I forgot we used to go to the lake, she said quietly. I forgot a lot of things. She put the photo down and rubbed her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice cracked. I owe more than I can pay. Credit cards, loans. I've been living way above my means for too long, trying to keep up this image. And now I'm being evicted unless I come up with 3 months' rent by the end of the week. I kept my hands in my lap. And you didn't think you could just tell me that I asked? I didn't want to admit how bad it had gotten. Not to you, not to anyone. I kept hoping things would turn around. I nodded slowly. Then I stood and walked to the window. The sky outside had gone from gray to a pale, filtered blue. The rain had stopped. A few birds were gathered near the feeder hanging from the porch beam, pecking at seeds and chirping to one another. I stayed there a while before turning back. I can't give you everything you're asking for, I said. But I'll help with the rent, enough to give you breathing room. Nellie nodded. Her shoulders seemed to drop slightly, like the weight had shifted, even if just a little. There's one condition, I added, returning to the chair across from her. No more lies. No more pretending. If something's wrong, you come to me with the truth. I won't always be able to fix it, but I'll listen. I'll help where I can. But not if I'm being misled. She nodded again, this time more slowly. And you need to start living within your reality, I said. No more designer handbags on credit. No more dinners out to keep up appearances. That world's not helping you. It's burying you. Her eyes filled again, but she didn't look away. I know, she whispered. I just didn't know how to stop. I didn't want to lose everything. You haven't lost everything, I said. Not yet. She reached for my hand. I let her hold it. Thank you, she said, for not turning your back on me. I never will, I said. We sat that way for a while, neither of us speaking. Just quiet, like there was still more to say, but it could wait. Later, we made dinner. Simple things, a roast I'd prepared earlier and some vegetables from the garden. She helped me set the table, and when I brought out the apple pie, she smiled. I used to beg for this every Sunday, she said. You did, I said, and always with extra cinnamon. After the dishes were cleared, she went back to the box. She pulled out the drawings, the little birthday cards, the old camp bracelets. Her face softened as she went through them, like she was remembering a life she hadn't looked at in a long time. When it was time to go, I wrote a check. Not for the full amount, but enough to cover the rent and a bit more. Enough to buy her some time. I folded it into an envelope and handed it to her without a word. She stood in the doorway, keys in hand, jacket draped over her arm. The photo of her as a child still sat on the coffee table. I'm going to try, Mom, she said. I want to do better. I believe you, I said. She hugged me, longer than usual, tighter. The kind of hug we hadn't shared since before Brad, before the apartment, before the calls became so rare. Then she was gone. I stood in the hallway until the sound of her car faded down the street. When I walked back inside, I noticed the photo was still on the table. I picked it up and looked at the little girl on her father's shoulders, grinning at the camera with a toothless smile and sun in her eyes. Maybe she hadn't disappeared after all. Maybe she'd just forgotten who she used to be. The next few mornings passed quietly. I kept to my usual routines, watering the violets in the windowsill, reading the paper from front to back, folding laundry with the old radio humming in the background. But something in the air had shifted. Nellie called twice that week. Not for anything, just to talk. The first time she said she was starting to go through her bank records, trying to get a clear picture of what she owed. The second time, she asked if I still had that financial workbook I used to use when I was helping James and Jessica figure out their mortgage years ago. I said I did. She said she might stop by to borrow it. She didn't come that day, but she called again the next. Each time the conversations were brief. Careful. But the tone had changed. There was no performance, no nervous chatter. Just honest, short sentences that landed where they were supposed to. I started spending more time in the attic. There were boxes I hadn't opened in years. Old teaching manuals from when I used to tutor math on the side. Birthday cards from neighbors long gone. I found a folder with travel brochures tucked inside, places Harold and I had circled in Penn Yellowstone's Savannah Glacier National Park. His handwriting was still on the corners. Fall colors next to Acadia, too hot beside Arizona. I brought the folder downstairs and left it on the kitchen table. It sat there for 2 days before I finally opened it again. I didn't plan a trip, not exactly, but I started making a list. The following Saturday, Jessica called. She asked if Tyler could spend the weekend with me. She and James had an anniversary dinner and wanted an overnight. I said yes, of course. Always yes for Tyler. He arrived with a duffel bag and a handful of science magazines. We made pizza from scratch, the way he liked it, with extra olives and no mushrooms. Afterward, he helped me carry Grandpa's old telescope to the backyard. The sky was clear, and the stars were bright over Ashfield. We found Orion first, then Cassiopeia. He asked questions about constellations, black holes, galaxies. I answered what I could, made up what I couldn't. At some point, he went quiet, just stared up at the sky. Then he said, "I'm glad Mom and Aunt Nellie aren't fighting anymore." I glanced over. He didn't look away from the telescope. "Dad said you're helping her figure things out," he added, like really helping her. "I'm trying," I said. "I think she's scared," he said. "But maybe she's trying too." I nodded. We stayed outside a little longer. Then he yawned and said he was cold, and we went inside and made hot cocoa. The next morning, after I dropped Tyler off, I stopped by the community center bulletin board and tore off a flyer. Beginner watercolor class. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Supplies included. That afternoon, I sat down with a fresh notebook and started working through my own numbers. The retirement accounts were in decent shape. The savings better than I expected. I split everything into categories: living expenses, medical travel. I marked a column for Nellie. Not a blank check, but a boundary I could stand by. The next call came from James. "Mom," he said without preamble. "Are you really selling the house?" "Yes," I said. "I've already spoken to a realtor." There was a pause on the line. "But where will you go?" "I found a small apartment in town. It's bright, and it's close to the library." "But this is our family home," he said. "Everything's here. Dad's things, the porch, the backyard." "I've spent 30 years in this house," I said. It's time for something easier. And this place is too much for one person. Another pause. I heard papers rustling in the background. Is this because of Nellie? He asked. No, I said. It's because of me. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, Jessica and I will come by this weekend. Maybe we can look through some of Dad's records, see what you want to keep. I'd like that, I said. Also, I'd like to have one last dinner here. Just the family. Next Sunday. He didn't object. Just said, okay. The following day I called Nellie. She answered on the second ring. I'm selling the house, I said. The paperwork's in progress. Wow, she said. That's big. I'd like to have a family dinner. One last gathering before I move? Just us? There was a short silence on her end. Yes, she said finally. That sounds right. The next few days moved quickly. I met with the realtor again, signed papers, started packing what I wanted to take. Set aside the rest for donation. Jessica claimed the china set from my mother's side. James asked for Harold's record collection. Tyler chose the telescope. Nellie hadn't stopped by yet, but she'd called twice. Said she was making progress with the debt restructuring paperwork. Said she'd filed for bankruptcy. Said she'd found a smaller apartment she could afford on her current income. We didn't talk long, but there was a calmness in her voice I hadn't heard in a long time. On Friday night, I sat in the living room with a yellow legal pad and a pen. Wrote down the menu for Sunday roast with rosemary scalloped potatoes, cranberry walnut salad, and the blueberry pie. I put the list on the fridge and checked the pantry. Everything I needed was already here. Sunday morning came soft and overcast, with the kind of sky that seemed to hush everything. I was up early, moving slow but steady. The roast went into the oven before 8. I rolled out pie crust, next hands working from memory-cold butter flour, a little salt. The scent of cinnamon and blueberries started rising by mid-morning, and I cracked the kitchen window to let the air drift through the house one last time. By noon, I'd set the dining table with the good linens. Jessica's china sat at each place pale cream with a blue-green ring around the edge. I folded the napkins by hand. Lit 2 taper candles. No centerpiece. Just simple, clean space between the dishes. I heard tires on gravel just after 1. Jessica and James came in first carrying a basket of rolls and a bottle of wine. James set them down in the kitchen and gave me a hug. Jessica hovered in the dining room for a moment, smoothing the hem of the tablecloth, adjusting a fork that didn't need adjusting. Tyler came in behind them with a paper bag full of board games. He gave me a quick squeeze around the waist and darted toward the living room. I waited. At 1:30, I went to the front window. Nellie's car wasn't there. By 2, I took the roast out of the oven. Jessica helped me ladle gravy into the boat and carry dishes to the table. We'd just finished setting everything down when I heard another car door shut. Nellie came in alone. Her coat was wrinkled, and her shoes were wet from the grass. She carried a square Tupperware dish and a small brown bag. Sorry I'm late, she said, brushing hair from her face. I made those honey carrots you used to do. They're probably cold now, but... I took the dish from her hands. They'll be just fine, I said. We sat down together. The food was good, tender, warm, familiar. Tyler said the pie was better than he remembered. James told a story about his first attempt at grilling that had everyone laughing. Even Nellie smiled. After dessert, we moved to the living room. Jessica spread a blanket on the carpet and opened one of Tyler's board games. Nellie asked to help with dishes, and I let her. We washed in silence for a few minutes, hands moving in rhythm. The water was hot and the plates clinked softly as we passed them back and forth. Then she said, I went through everything. Sorted out the debt. Got a payment plan approved. It's going to take a while, but it's doable. I nodded, passing her a glass. I started looking at part-time bookkeeping work, she continued. Freelance stuff. just to supplement until I find something better. I've already turned down 3 invites this week to dinners, events, things I would have said yes to before, even when I knew I couldn't afford them. She looked over. I don't want to go back to that version of me, the one who said yes just to keep up. I wiped my hands on a towel and looked at her. You don't have to, I said. We didn't say much else. The clatter of silverware and the sound of laughter from the other room filled the space just fine. Later, as everyone packed up to leave, I stood on the porch and watched them load the car. Jessica hugged me twice. James promised to come by next weekend with some moving boxes. Tyler waved from the back seat, holding up the game we hadn't finished. Nellie lingered a moment longer. I know this doesn't fix everything, she said, but thank you for giving me the chance to try. I reached out and brushed a leaf from her shoulder. You're doing it, Nellie, I said. You're already doing it. She nodded and got into her car. The driveway emptied and the quiet came back. Inside, the kitchen still smelled like rosemary and cinnamon. I sat at the table and let the silence settle in around me. There were dishes left in the sink, a pie plate scraped clean, a single fork under the table I hadn't noticed. I picked it up, rinsed it, and set it to dry with the rest. The last family dinner had ended, but something else had started, quiet, steady, and honest. And it was enough. The apartment was smaller than I remembered from the viewing, but the light made up for it. Morning sun came through the east-facing window over the sink, and in the late afternoon, the whole living room glowed like a watercolor. I'd moved in the week after the house sold quietly without fanfare. Jessica helped me pack up the last few boxes, and James drove the truck. The hardest part was leaving the garden. I dug up one small patch of peonies and brought them with me in a pot. They sat now on the balcony, still adjusting. The first few nights were quiet. I could hear the neighbor upstairs walking in soft socks. The hum of the elevator shaft. On Thursday, I baked a loaf of banana bread and brought it to the office downstairs for the building manager. On Friday, I walked to the library and checked out 3 novels and a small book on national parks. Saturday morning, I went to my first watercolor class. The instructor was a woman named Carla. 60, maybe 70, with soft white hair pulled into a loose knot. She handed out brushes and trays, showed us how to stretch the paper, how to mix color. We painted lemons that day. Simple shapes, soft edges. Mine looked more like squash, but the yellow was cheerful. At the end of class, Carla offered to walk with me to the corner for coffee. We sat outside on a bench, sipping slowly. She asked if I'd just moved into the complex. I said yes. New starts are good, she said, brushing a leaf from her sleeve. Tiring, but good. That evening, I went home and unpacked the last of the photo albums. I set one on the coffee table. The page fell open to an old picture, Harold holding Tyler when he was a baby, Nellie seated beside them, holding a bottle and smiling off to the side. I closed the book gently and turned off the lamp. 2 days later, Nellie called. I got the apartment, she said. It's not much, but it's clean. Hardwood floors. My lease starts next month. That's good, I said. I'm nervous, she added, but I'm okay. We didn't say much else. A week later, I invited her over. Just her. No expectations, no dinner. I made chicken salad and sliced strawberries, and we sat on the balcony while the wind moved the curtains. I got a job, she said, spooning sugar into her tea. Nothing glamorous. Part-time data entry for a real estate office. But it pays. That's all it needs to do, I said. She nodded and looked out across the parking lot. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. What's this? I asked. Breakdown of what I owe, she said. Credit cards, personal loans. I'm still sorting a few things out, but this is most of it. She set it on the table between us. You don't have to do anything with it, she said. I just wanted you to see it, all of it. I slid the envelope toward me, but didn't open it right then. She stayed a little longer. We talked about books and how she'd started checking some out from the library near her new place. Before she left, she hugged me, not the tight kind, just a quiet, deliberate one. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. It was all there. Every balance, every monthly payment, notes in her handwriting beside each one. The next morning, I called the bank. I didn't drain my account, but I set up a separate fund. A portion I could release gradually under my own control. Enough to give her room to breathe while still keeping her responsible. That evening I called Nellie. I went through it, I said. I'll help, but on terms we both agree on. She didn't say anything right away. Then quietly she said, "Thank you." After that, we didn't speak for a few days. Then she called to say she'd opened her own checking account. Said she was learning to use spreadsheets. Said she'd canceled 2 subscriptions she'd forgotten she even had. The following Sunday, Jessica invited us both for brunch. Nothing fancy, just eggs, toast, and fruit, but the table felt full. The conversation was light. Tyler showed us a project he was working on for school, a homemade sundial. Nellie sat beside him, helping him adjust the angle. Her laughter sounded different, clearer somehow. On the way out, Jessica pulled me aside. "You seem good," she said. "Settled." "I think I am," I said. We stood there for a minute in the doorway, watching Nellie help Tyler zip his coat. Then Jessica said, "Mom, thank you for how you've handled everything. I know it couldn't have been easy." I gave her hand a squeeze. "It's still unfolding," I said. "But it's getting there." A few weeks passed before the meeting at the lawyer's office. It was a Wednesday afternoon. The sky had that brittle winter brightness sunlight, sharp but cold. I wore the navy coat Harold had bought me one Christmas, wool tailored, still in good shape. I'd called ahead to confirm the time. The woman at the front desk said they were expecting us at 2. I arrived 10 minutes early. The office was in a modest 2-story brick building on Oak Street next to a dentist and a tailor shop. Inside it smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish. The receptionist greeted me by name and offered coffee. I declined and took a seat near the window. 5 minutes later, Nellie came in, coat unbuttoned, cheeks flushed from the cold. She looked nervous, but determined. I stood and we exchanged a quick hug. "They're ready for us," the receptionist said, and led us down the hall. The room was simple mahogany table, 4 chairs, a framed painting of a river on the far wall. Mr. Hadley, the estate attorney, stood to greet us. His assistant sat beside him sorting papers into neat stacks. Once we were seated, he cleared his throat. "As you both know, Harold and I updated the will together 3 years ago," he said. "Evelyn, you are listed as primary executor and sole beneficiary of the estate." He paused and looked at Nellie. "However, he said your husband requested that a separate letter be read at this time, something he composed privately, addressed to you both." He reached for a sealed envelope, slid it open, and unfolded the paper inside. "Shall I read it aloud?" he asked. I nodded. He began. "To Evelyn and Nellie, if you're hearing this, then I'm no longer around to say it in person. There's no easy way to explain what I allowed to happen over the years. I failed you both. I turned away from things I should have faced, and I let bitterness lead me where love should have been." I felt Nellie shift beside me, quiet and still. I always hoped things would work themselves out. The letter continued, that silence would somehow become peace. But silence isn't peace. It's just distance with a locked door. There was a pause in the room, still but heavy. To Evelyn, Mr. Hadley read, "You carried so much more than your share. I don't know if I ever told you what your steadiness meant to me, or how deeply I regret letting resentment build between us over Nellie's choices. You were right to step back. I only wish I'd followed your example sooner." To Nellie, he went on, "You are not a failure. You are a daughter, a woman trying to find her way. I judged you for struggling when I should have helped you stand. I wrote this letter hoping you'd still be willing to hear it." He folded the paper and set it gently on the table. No one said anything for a moment. Then Mr. Hadley continued with the legal details, accounts, transfers, titles. I listened. Nellie listened. But it was the letter that stayed with us as we walked out into the cold. We didn't speak until we were halfway to the parking lot. "Did you know he'd written that?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, I needed to hear it," she said quietly. "I think he needed to write it," I replied. That night, Nellie called me. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what to do with my share." "It's your decision," I told her. "I want to put some of it toward finishing my degree," she said, "and maybe a small down payment on something modest. But the rest, I think I'd like to set up a fund. Something that helps other women in tough spots. Single moms, maybe." "That's a good idea," I said. "Let me know if you need help setting it up." "I will," she said. "Thank you." A week later, she brought over documents for me to look over. She was deliberate, steady, not rushing, just ready. Jessica came by that Sunday. We had lunch, chicken soup, and warm rolls. She brought photos from Tyler's school play and a bouquet of daffodils. Before she left, she hugged me and said, "I've missed seeing you like this. Steady. At peace." I didn't say anything right away. Then I said, "It's not peace, exactly. But it's a kind of light." And it was. Quiet, steady light. Spring came early that year. I remember it not because of the date on the calendar, but because of the light. Soft and clean through the kitchen window, landing on the table where I sat with a mug of tea and the ledger for the new foundation. We'd called it the Evelyn Grace Fund, Nellie's idea. I told her she didn't have to use my name. She said it wasn't about the name, it was about the steadiness she wanted to carry forward. She'd moved into a little duplex on Birch Lane, just 2 miles from here. Not too big, just enough. She came by once a week now, sometimes more. Helped me sort through paperwork, mail, groceries. But mostly, we just sat, talked. She was different. Not in the loud, obvious way people expect change to look, but in her posture, in the way she asked questions now and really listened to the answers. Jessica and I had found a rhythm again. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever really is, but the space between us had softened. We took turns hosting Sunday dinner. Tyler always brought his sketch pad and would sit cross-legged on the rug, humming to himself while the adults talked. It made the house feel fuller. There was one afternoon in early May, I remember, because the lilacs were blooming. I was out back trimming the smaller branches along the fence when Nellie pulled up and got out of the car with a slow, thoughtful expression. She had a folder in her hand. "It's final," she said, holding it out. "The legal paperwork for the fund. Everything signed." I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and took it from her. "You proud of yourself?" She nodded once. "Yeah, I think I am." We went inside. I poured 2 glasses of iced tea and sat across from her at the kitchen table. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what Dad said in the letter. About silence not being peace." I looked at her, waiting. I used to think keeping my head down meant I was strong, that if I could just get through things without complaining, it would count for something. I nodded. I understood. But maybe strength is also knowing when to speak, when to ask for help, when to stop pretending you're fine. Neither of us said anything for a while. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a mourning dove called. That evening, after she left, I sat in the living room and looked around. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. There was life in it again. In the photos returned to the mantel. In the books stacked by the reading chair. in the folded quilt Nellie had made me for Christmas. Grief doesn't vanish. Regret doesn't dissolve just because time passes. But something else grows alongside them if you let it. Space. Grace. A kind of quiet understanding that doesn't demand anything of you, only that you keep going. And I had. Thank you for listening. If this story reminded you of someone you love or someone you've forgiven, take a moment to reach out. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, you're welcome to stay a while. I'm glad you're here.